Hello, welcome to an episode of Biblio Files, the show on AADL TV, brought to you by the Ann Arbor District Library, where we briefly discuss one topic of books where we each choose a different book of our choice. So I am joined by Lucy and Christopher, and my name is Amanda. And today we are discussing books by Arab American authors. So, Lucy, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. The book that I am picked for this is called Fencing with the King, and it is by Diana Abu Jabir. And it is a book that takes place in 1995. It's fiction. And it starts with a woman who is a poet. She's an Arab American poet in upstate New York. Her name's Amani, and she is struggling with her career. Her marriage has ended. She's moved back in with her parents. And her father gets this amazing invitation to go to Jordan, where he's from, and fence with the king of Jordan for the king's 60th birthday. Her father does not want to go. Ever since he moved to the United States, like 30 years ago, he's really had very little to do with his life in Jordan. But she urges him to go, and so they head off to Jordan. And she's looking at it as an escape from what's going on in her life. But when she gets there, she starts to learn more and more about her family and her father's family. And she has these two uncles. Maybe there were other family members. And one of her uncles is manipulating the situation because he wants to inherit a bunch of land. And that's one of the big themes in this book is like land and the importance of land, because the people living in Jordan, many of them they're Palestinians and they've been displaced. And so having something, this land is very important. But then there's also this culture of nomads as well. And there I learned a lot about the history of the area, and there's a lot of Middle East history in this book. And so as Amani is searching for the truth about her family, she finds these pieces of a poem she thinks were written by her grandmother. And she sort of starts to put them together, and they lead to something that uncovers the scandal. And so there's this mystery element to it as well, which is really compelling. The author's a great writer. So it's like this beautifully descriptive writing about the area and what's going on and the food. But then there's also this kind of mystery, this family mystery. And so it's really a lot about family as well. And then exile, forced or chosen, like her father chooses to go. And all these pieces sort of come together. And so I would say family is the thing that stood out the most to me. And while in the beginning, I thought I was learning a lot about the area and the history, in the end, I was really like reading this very moving book about kind of finding your family and finding your home. And there was a lot in it, and it was really good. I'm glad I read it. I sort of just pulled it off my shelf, and it was a great discovery. So that is Fencing with the King by Diana Abu Jabir. Christopher, what did you pick?
Well, I read The Wild Fox of Yemen. This is by Threya Almontasser, who is a Yemeni American poet. This book won the Walt Whitman Award for Poetry. And I would say that, like a lot of poetry, there are lots of meanings and subtext here that really reward taking your time and even rereading. A lot of her language is very striking. So in the very first poem, called Hunting Girliness, she writes, "My girliness is the size of a Cerberus. I unchain it out of my body, serpent tail tombing a Mercedes, someone's scissor hands shrubs, trio-headed howls, loudening the clean suburb. It is not tasteful to fuck with the tooth fairy, baby teeth planted in the oleanders." So there's a lot of visual imagery that she conjures up with her words. Of course, not every poem is like that. A lot of the poems are really rooted in Yemeni life and culture, but I would say more often it's kind of in the background of many of the poems as she kind of gives her observations on life. Lots of the poems have Arabic words in Arabic script in them that are not translated. There are also lots of unfamiliar Arabic words that are in Latinized script, also not translated. And then there are words from history that might be unfamiliar, like Arabia Felix, which is an old, antiquated term for Yemen. So I enjoyed the fact that lots of these things are beyond my immediate reach without knowing more about Yemen culture and Yemeni history. You know, when I read a book of Russian history or poetry or whatever, and there are lots of Russian words, even if they're printed in Latin script, when they're translated, in a way, it's almost worse. You know, when I read dacha and it says cottage, it's like, well, it's not a cottage. And I feel like leaving some of these words untranslated kind of invites you to do a little learning on your own. And I really appreciate that about the book. I said that there is a lot in there about Yemeni culture and life. There's also a lot about American culture and life. You know, there are quotes from Nicki Minaj, references to the bodegas of New York City, and on and on. Almantazer also plays with verse structure. So one of the poems it's called, can't find it right now, but it's something like butchered with the kiss of a blade, all about killing a lamb. And it's quite a visceral reading of butchering this lamb and eating it with relish and not feeling bad about it. So, but the structure of the words themselves form a lamb, which is kind of interesting. The last thing I want to say about this is that each of the three sections has a photograph, and it's a photograph of people, and their eyes are all scratched out. So this is inviting lots of possible readings. You know, maybe the things they're seeing are too horrible. Maybe they're gone. You know, it could be a lot of different things. So it's a very interesting book. You have to take your time with it, even though it's a slim volume. So that is The Wild Fox of Yemen by Threya Almantasser. Amanda?
Yes, so the book that I chose for this time is called Other Words for Home. It's by Jasmine Warga, and this is a middle grade novel for kids. And it was published in 2019, and it actually won the Newbery Medal for children's literature that year. It is a book written in verse, and it is phenomenal. I really enjoyed this book. I actually listened to it on audio, which is a really nice way to listen to it. It didn't have some of the sing-songiness as some other novels in verse that you listen to on audio have. You almost forget that it's actually written in verse because it sounds like you're listening to like complete paragraphs and chapters, but it's really well done. And I listened to an audio, and then I peeked through and read a couple of, when I had the physical book, I flipped through just to read a couple of them on the page as well. But so the book is about a young girl who is 12, Jude. Jude lives in Syria with her mother, her father, and her older brother. Her brother runs a shop there. Or no, her father runs a shop there, and her brother is involved in the anti-war movement. Her mother is very pregnant, and at some point things just get really bad there, and Jude and her mother leave Syria, and they go through customs, and they get to Ohio. I think they're outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And they're going to live with an aunt and uncle and a cousin that is Jude's age, but she was raised in America. So she has a very different mentality and things that she knows about middle school. So you've got this 12-year-old refugee. She does not speak English. It's very limited. Her mother doesn't speak English. And it's a culture shock of language, of being in middle school and just fitting in and understanding what's going on around you, and how her vision of what America was from like clips and movies and magazines are totally different than what she's experiencing while being in Ohio at this middle school and with this new family that her and her mother are living with. Her cousin's the same age as her, but completely different experience. Her cousin shuts her out, doesn't really want much to do with her. She's never invited into her, preteen bedroom, which is always a big deal when you're like a 12-year-old girl. She's 12, she's in middle school, she's like coming of age, she gets her period in the middle of the book. So there's a lot of things going on with her, like emotionally, physically. She's worried about her brother back in Syria. She's worried about her father back in Syria. She's also trying to support her mother and the pregnancy and helping her mom kind of with the language. She's learning a lot about American culture. But she's an outsider still. She doesn't speak the language. She's in a class with other students who are also ESL, and she really bonds with some of the kids in there, with some of them because they're going through similar experiences of learning the language. Those segments were really dear, watching these kids bond with each other. But she's an outsider still. She's called a Middle Easterner, like for the first time. That's a new term, a new label for her. But Judy is a character. It's got moments of heart. There's moments of humor, but it's also very real. And it's a really interesting glimpse to watch these Syrian refugees through the eyes of this 12-year-old girl adapting to a new home. I think it's a really cool perspective. And I just think like middle school kids need to be reading this book because it gives you so much insight as to what other people who are sitting in your class might be going through that you have no idea about, or just heard little glimpses about, or just it makes you have see things through a different lens through this middle school's eyes. But she's a character. She's got charisma. She's got spunk. And while she's trying to find her way and adapt and live and learn, she doesn't give up. She embraces her identity. She makes new friends. Her cousin eventually warms up to her, and it's a really great book. I really, really enjoyed it, and I was glad that I was finally able or had the time or chose to read it for this. So that is Other Words for Home by Jasmine Orga. Does anybody have any other comments on Arab American authors or any of the books we talked about? No, we're good. All right. Well, listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in to an episode of Biblio Files. We've got plenty others. If you're looking for more book discussions, look back and see what other topics we've discussed. We will be back again next time with a fresh topic. If you are reading something fun or interesting, or if you have really great suggestions for some other Arab American authors, we want to hear about them. Drop a comment below, and hopefully we'll have some new reads ahead of us. So thanks for tuning in.